there was a fire up there, New Year's Eve. So
that. And they think it was the Roots.
Yes, that basically they're going, because they have video of the same ridgeline, fire there. They put out the fire.
Yeah, they put it all the way.
And then Santa Ana winds kick up.
And it picked it up on the ground.
Done.
Somebody had told me they thought that's what it was.
Done.
All right, so the video that tripped me out the most, I watched it last night. I mean, really, like, because I was a rabbi, so I sat with it. It was, did you see the Bishop of Washington? So it was a female bishop. She was the head bishop of Washington at the Washington Church. And I guess after the inauguration, it's normal to go to church the next day. So it's Trump and Melania and his kids and Vance and his wife. She starts
cracking them.
No. So, but they're selling these little benches, So Trump looked like a big old, whatever.
Yeah.
Nah, she just was like, she talked about the Christian virtues of honesty, humility, and mercy. Right? But you could tell it was like 15 minutes on like what it means to be on, and she's heartfelt.
Yeah.
And he like,
No, you can see the nonverbal
did you see
cue.
it?
I saw pieces of it.
And I thought for me, man, it was so interesting to go, okay, we know who Trump is. He's a business gangster. So for him, it's cost-benefit analysis.
100%.
Are you with me or against me? Is the only way he relates to people.
100%.
And so immediately, like, you're not with me. You're
against me.
against me.
And then she wedged herself against them 100% because you could see the nonverbal communication.
Of course, she said, please have mercy on. I mean, listen, you're going to bring up gay people around Trump and immigrants around Trump, and you're not saying get rid of them and fuck them and let's just do. Yeah. But it was so deep to just the juxtaposition for me, bro, of this woman who spent her life in the church, who probably had disdain for Trump. You know what I'm saying?
100%. And she was kind.
But was able to be kind and have disdain where Trump can't do it. But nobody, it's tripping because nobody said anything deep to him ever in public like that. Like, it's all news politics.
Yeah, it was like low-key confrontational in a loving, kind way.
And she was a bishop. And so there was an authority that he couldn't
well,
really.
You can't push back on that.
What are you going to do? You're going to stand up and tell a bishop, get the fuck out of here?
Yeah.
There's so there was something so interesting.
Yeah. I've never even thought about that. The dynamic of it is like anyone else. If, like, you think about a reporter, keep your mouth shut. Yeah, I'm the president of the United States.
He's done it to judges. He's done it to. You're going to do it to a bishop on TV in front of a church?
Yeah, bad.
And so he was so like, really? And he was like that fucking cunt bitch, blah, blah, when he left. And what's trippy is when you think about how angry he was, what she was saying, right? Now, there's a nuanced version of, hey, we need to protect our borders. I didn't say anything about being gay being wrong, but I'm not into, right? Like, there's a conversation to be had with her about, therefore what, right? But it's interesting to not be able to hear anything about a concept of mercy or compassion. Like, that you're like, even just mentioning that is like, first of all, Trump doesn't believe her. So Trump's like, you're against me.
Yeah, 100%.
This is not about mercy.
You can feel it.
He doesn't know that some people actually give a fuck and they're not playing a game. Like, that she actually has a thing called compassion. He doesn't know it.
Yeah.
He's like, no, you're just fucking with me. Like, no, actually, I'm not fucking with you. I mean, she's saying it. Yeah, that for me was deep, bro. And I was 15 minutes. I watched the whole thing twice. And I know, it's funny, man. I have a homie that was just like Trump. He died, and it was so like after he died, I really like reevaluated. I mean, I knew him since I was kindergarten.
Yeah. So
I thought so much about our relationship, bro. Because he died like in a fucking terrible way and shit, and whatever, was the whole thing. And he was just like Trump, bro. He was just like a fucking bullshitting, never taking responsibility, always hustling. Mm-hmm. But I really understood him for him. You know what I mean? Because he's my homie. So when I think about Trump, I'm always like, trying to understand, like, from Trump's point of view.
Yeah. You're looking at it from the view of he's just another human who's extremely flawed.
He's a guy with high emotional intelligence who's always looking to press an advantage, who doesn't think about, like, my homie, it didn't matter how many times I rescued him, and I rescued him like literally 100 times. If he needed me, and I was like, I can't do it, bro. He'd be like, man, why? And I'm like, why? I'm like, because I rescued you 100. And he's like, that's fucked up. I'm like, that's fucked up? I'm like, you've never done anything for me, bro.
Yeah, 100%.
And he's like, why would you say that? You know what I mean? It was just like, there's no context.
Yeah, no insight.
He had no context of our relationship. It was just the relationship. And so Trump is like, he has no context You know, like when he's working with a person, it's just like me and you.
Yeah.
Like, it don't matter if I fired you yesterday or I lied to you a minute ago. Like, it's just like, here we are again in this new moment.
Yeah, means to an end. Everything's a means to an end.
Trippy, bro. It tripped that video for me. That's going to go down in history when people really look at that, bro. The only time he ever shut his mouth.
Yeah. It was funny because they snapped to a clip of Vance.
Oh, he was
pissed. But he looked over at his wife.
And his wife was not pissed, bro.
I know. She was chilling.
She was the only one that was like, I mean, how you going to be that mad if somebody going, hey, don't forget about mercy and compassion? I mean, really, you're going to be really upset? Like, that's almost demonic.
Well, and like the other thing to like take into consideration and like is that, you know, your wife wouldn't be here based on the bill that you're.
Bro, you wouldn't be here, bro. Trump was a German immigrant. He was a fucking Irish immigrant.
I know.
I mean, come on, bro. Nobody would be here.
That was actually, it's funny you said that because I was literally talking to someone about, I was like, how does that, I mean, probably there's areas where it's a little loose because I saw this morning, right before action this morning, like 20 minutes ago, I'm on my way over here and I was sitting at Air One. So I'm like scrolling through TikTok and they're showing the ice raids that are going down in Boston right now.
That, bro.
Hey, some of those motherfuckers they're getting though, bro, need to go.
Cold, bro.
Need to go. It's like this weird thing, but here's the thing. Like I go we chop this content up right now and I say that.
Yeah.
I immediately get bracketed in you're a Trump supporting conservative. There's like no nuance to the argument. The way I view it now is like I am center left throughout the middle of the country.
Yeah, me too.
In California, I'm center right though.
But I think
it's weird.
I was thinking about this when I was shooting my thing of videos, you know, with him. And I was like, oh shit, like I said some shit about Trump. And I like immediately, you know, it's a bunch of people was like, oh, they're just going to like assume a bunch, right? Because I said some stuff. And I think the thing for me that's such like an important thing to be modeling is what is it like to hold a genuine opinion of somebody or something being good and bad? And it's always saying, I was saying, and I was like half joking, but it was true. I was saying like, no, there are things I like about Trump. You know, I mean, there's an authenticity, even if it's like not super reflective authenticity.
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Like as a homie, he would be the homie. I'm like, oh, this is like, come on, this dude's like the homie. He's authentic. He just says whatever floats in his mind. You know, he's a strong dude. Like I told my dad, who's, you know, he's hooked on CNN, right? He like took the CNN train. And I told my dad, I said, damn, bro, when he got shot in the ear, I said, dude, it's tough.
Yeah, it's just fucking crazy, bro.
I said, dude's a tough guy, bro. I mean, to be 76, you pop your head up above the Secret Service like 2 minutes after you get shot damn near in the head. And my dad, who can't stand him, he goes, that's just a reflex. And I go, okay, like it's a reflex, but it's a tough reflex, bro. Some people's reflex is to hit the ground.
100%.
And his was to go, you know, like he couldn't. Right, I'm like, okay, the guy's a tough guy.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? You got to say the guy's a tough guy, you know?
Well, it's the nuance of the situation. It's funny you bring that up because I was thinking about the media because Elton John, when he won the election, he came out to Rocket Man.
Oh,
and Elton John had an opinion about it. And he's like, listen, I don't fuck with Trump. But then they interviewed Elton John.
Yeah.
And they tried to get him to like jump on the bandwagon. And he goes, listen, I've known Donald for 35 years. He goes, at the end of the day, I actually think he's a funny guy.
Yeah.
It was like a very moderate. He's like, I don't like what he stands for, but he's funny. Like that was a good one. Like Rocket Man was good. You know what I mean? To where like there's nuance to it. Like, hey, like, yeah, listen, the way he carries himself, there's an aspect of it that I can't stand, but there's also a part of it where he lacks almost like a certain level of tact or just doesn't care to where he's like, oh, just fling it out of his mouth.
He's funny. He deconstructs stuff.
Yeah.
He deconstructs it. So like, because he doesn't care, it allows you so clearly to see how much BS there is, how everybody kind of BS's, like the way that he attacks things, you know? So there's a lot there. I was more upset when he got elected than I thought I would be.
This year?
I was more upset than I thought I'd be because I was kind of like, oh, okay, you know, hey man, I figured he was going to get elected, you know? But I think there was, not that I know what's going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen. You know, it could be good for the country, could not be good for the country. Of course. But I think for me, there was an interesting split that I had in myself where I was very early to being anti-woke. Like early, like
These were conversations you and I were having.
For 15 years ago. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
15 years ago. Because I had a mentor who schooled me just on like
identity politics.
You know where it started? It started, I was anti-military because I grew up in Berkeley, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, of course.
Whoop-de-whoop. And I was in class with this teacher who's a Marine, and he became my mentor, my rabbi. And he's super pro-military. I mean, he had 50 guns, and he's just pro-military guy. You know what I mean? The only Jew, right? Who's like that, the West Coast Jew. And I walked up to him after. I was like, man, you're like a rabbi? I'm like, how? How are you pro-military? And he said, let me ask you a question, Shai. I said, okay. He said, as far as you know historically, has the most powerful country in the world always been the country with the most powerful military? Are those two things correlated in history, basically? And I thought about it, and I'm like, okay. Not that I'm a historian.
Of course, yeah.
And I'm like,
you can deduce enough.
Yeah. I'm like, yeah. And he goes, okay. And do countries always jostle historically to be the most powerful and dominant country in the region, in our case in the world?
Yeah.
And I'm like, sure. And he says, well, which three countries are the most powerful countries right now? And I'm like, well, United States, Russia, China.
Yeah, that's it.
And he's like, well, what do you think? Mm-hmm. And I was like, okay.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Yeah. The uncomfortable truth of my manager.
Yeah.
I have to have you meet him one time.
Yeah.
Like,
what's his name?
Tuck. He is a sniper. He studies geopolitics.
Yeah.
He actually sent me this video. I'm supposed to listen to it, but it talks about Pakistan and Turkey.
Yeah.
They hate each other.
Yeah.
But there's a balance in terms of when we opt to support, because we're supporting both sides.
Yeah. Oh, interesting.
And then one side hates Israel.
Yeah.
And then and how gnarly geopolitics gets, because people will be pissed. They go, let's just use Israel, Palestine for an example. Why are we supporting that? There's so many dynamics at play. It's not just Israel, Palestine, bro. This is like the entire Middle East.
It's the Middle East. It's Russia. It's China.
It's insane. It's
oil.
So insane.
It's economics. No, it's insane. I think the thing that, like, going back to speaking about both sides, and I could be wrong about this. Maybe it's not wise to do, but I sort of feel like even when you're at war. So he made his point. I said, no, I would prefer the United States to be the world power, which means we have to have military presence. Okay. But I think it's so important to always say we want peace.
I agree.
You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I just think, like, even Netanyahu, and it's like, hey, we're going in here. Hey, but I want you to know we have no interest in harming a hair on a single Palestinian's head, and we want peace. And like over and over again, we got to say that. You know what I mean?
Do you feel like he said that?
No, he ain't said shit.
Yeah, he ain't said shit. Okay, yeah, because I don't follow any of that. It's like way too divisive.
No. And it's funny. The rabbi that was my mentor, who's an intense guy, black belt in jiu-jitsu, he's a Marine, he's a tough guy. You know what I mean? I emailed him and I said, he moved back to Israel when it happened. Like, he's like, yo, I'm going back. Like, he's like that. You know what I mean? And I emailed him and I'm like, yeah, hoping you and your family is good, whoop-de-whoop, and, praying for peace. And he emails me back. He goes, victory and then peace. And I'm like, I respect this, what I mean? I respect this guy, bro. This is my mentor, you know what I mean? This is my big homie.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay. I mean, what do you say? Hey, that's an opinion. I get it,
Yeah, I think it's also different. I would probably view it the same way if I had been shaped by war.
If I was in Israel. If I was in Israel.
100%.
I'm in Israel, bro. I'm in Israel, bro.
Yeah, it's a different beast. I just I haven't been to war. At one point, I really wanted to go to war.
Really?
Oh yeah. I feel like probably one slight. I don't have regrets, but I wish I would have went into the military.
Really?
I had the Marines. I actually got out of a possession and sales charge because the Marines wrote me a letter and then they sent me to county for 6 months. I did 6 days and then they put me on work release.
Whoa.
And when I got on work release, I just went back to selling drugs and I was going to go into the Marines and try to be special forces. Like, I wanted to do that. But I'm I have a lot of friends who've done that and shit like that. Like, your perception of the world shifts. I mean, even for me, I think part of even tying into like the wokeness,
Yeah.
when I have when I engage in discourse with people who like perpetuate that mentality but have never been in a third world country.
Yeah.
I'm like, you have no insight.
Yeah.
You actually don't even have an opinion.
Yeah.
In my opinion, your opinion's completely invalid because you don't even know how people live in third world countries. You know, like to talk about privilege. You're talking about privilege from a privileged position.
Yeah, I mean, there's a deep hypocrisy. I used to get frustrated, and I have conflicting feelings about Israel. I'm a Jew. I stand for the right to Israel, for Israel to exist. But there's conflicting feelings. I'm also brown. I'm also an underdog guy. You know,
100%.
I admit a lot of ignorance. Also, like, hey, I don't know. You know, I'm not in the military on either side, but. You know, I definitely felt like when there were all the protests against Israel out here, I was like, man, this is so ironic that you'd have a bunch of colonists in California, meaning like California got snatched up by the Latino community, you know, from the Indians and the Mexican community. And I'm like, and you're protesting for somebody else to get out of somebody else's land because they took the land, but you're living in a land that your people like. If you want to protest, get out of California. Like that would be really like I would really admire that. I'd be like, wow, you're living by something. Like, you're willing to give up something other than 2 hours.
But what about the Tongva people?
Yeah, you know what I mean. I mean, it for me, it was like, you know, that hypocrisy piece.
No, it's crazy. Well, and because the truth is the nuance in all of this thing is everyone's on stolen land to some degree.
And for me, there's so much conflict because of the money.
In what aspect?
Well, so like, I got family in Silicon Valley. Like I know that crowd kind of well. Like, I've been around them. You know, I'm not part of that crowd, but I've been around that crowd, which is interesting. And they were hyper progressive, really environmental forward. You know, really in that ideology, in the progressive ideology. You know, including the power bases, right? Except for Peter Thiel, like basically everybody else. And watching Silicon Valley switch, you
overnight.
know, just flip, boom.
Yeah, overnight. Yeah.
But I knew it, man, because I remember I went to Marin County, you know, and a lot of folks are living in Marin. I'm from the Bay, and I'm in Marin County. I'm like, why is this so weird? This is like the most progressive place on the planet. You know, Marin County split. It's like the Marin County projects, and then there's the billionaires.
Yeah.
I'm in the billionaire part, and I met the guy. I can't remember the name of it. They got this fancy market over there, but I'm in the market. And I'm like, you can't find a black face or a Latino face in the wealthy side of Marin County, at least at the time, unless they're working there. You know, there wasn't even that many people working there.
How long ago?
This was, I don't know, 12 years ago. That I, you know, and I just remember going, I'm like, what weird bedfellows, you know? And I realized, like, man, like being hyper pro business and being hyper progressive, that's a very fragile situation, bro. Hyper pro business and hyper pro business in terms of the cultural issues that plague the United States around race, around poverty, and being incredibly pro business is a very tricky.
Yeah, because the inherent shortcomings of capitalism and shit like that.
Well, let's be honest. When it became incredibly inconvenient, and some of the parts of the woke ideology were like, we don't believe in, and I agree with that. It's like, well, we're done with the whole thing. We're done. Because ultimately, what is the value? I mean, ultimately, I would say that the value is pro-business. The only, in my opinion, pro-business argument you could make that could be considered progressive is saying, yeah, like, we need businesses to grow, to flourish our economy. That will trickle down. Yes, some people are worth $400 billion and most people are worth negative $50,000. But eventually, you know, this is going to, you know, all boats will rise. And then also this idea, which I think is actually insane, but really smart people believe this. Well, technology is actually going to fix these things for us. I mean, there's a real vision in Silicon Valley that, like, between the robots and artificial intelligence, this is going to solve all of our problems. Yeah. Which just to me is like, this is an interesting fantasy that's been going on for 500 years now. That not that technology can't make things better. Obviously, we prolong life and we have systems and, you know, but like, it seems that with every problem we solve, we create another problem or 2 or 3 more problems.
Yeah, the byproduct of the solution.
And not that life, I mean, and the quality of life is so much better. Yeah. But yet nobody would walk around going, oh my God, life is utopian. You know what I mean?
I don't think it's possible. And me personally, I think maybe I'm like a little bit of a nihilist in the sense of like, I think struggle is actually important.
Oh, that's good.
especially when you think about the demographic we will work with.
Yeah.
There's no resilience. I mean, I look back now. It's funny. I started doing therapy recently again, beginning of the year.
Finally, for the first time.
Yeah. No, I mean, listen. I was mandated to therapy my whole life because I was a ward of the court. Yeah. So my relationship with therapy was always like, at like 8 years old, I had told the therapist like,
I want to talk to you about coercion. By the way, remind me, that was something I was thinking about today.
Coercion.
Come back to it.
Coercion. When I was 8 years old, I was in a therapy appointment, and it was play therapy at this time.
Yeah.
And I looked up at the therapist, and I was like, just because you're trying to like be my friend, this isn't like going to work in terms of what you're trying to do right now, like along those lines.
When you say you looked up the therapist?
No, I told them that in the middle of the therapy session. I basically was like, I already know what your job is. Yeah. This really isn't going to work. Yeah. I think I was 8 or 9 years old. Yeah. Because at that point, I had already been in this, I think maybe that.
And what was his job? From your point of view, able to report back to the court? He was like the arm of an authority?
Yeah, in my mind. That was what it was. And because I had social workers already in my life in general. You're reporting to the social worker, talking about whatever.
And was that the truth?
What do you mean?
Your belief at that time?
That he was reporting to the social worker?
Well, that's all that he was.
Yeah.
Really? So
in my mind, that's what it was.
Yeah, no, but I'm saying looking back now, you're like, oh, I kind of like.
Yeah, no, I was a dick. Yeah. I was like a punk.
I mean, you were a kid.
I was a kid. I was a dick 8-year-old kid, you know? Or I can look at it in the way it was like I was emotionally intelligent given the experience that I had. But regardless, I look back on all that stuff now and I'm like, I'm not upset that I went through it. I think I'm a little rigid and completely disconnected. Not completely, but very disconnected from my emotional experience because I don't lend a lot of weight or credibility to my emotional experience, especially if it's heightened negative emotion.
What does that mean when you say you don't give a lot
like of weight to if I experience negative emotion, I'm like, I experience it, but I don't sit in it. I'm like, we need to move past this shit. Like, I don't need to sit and like process through it a long time. I'll think about it, what I do wrong, where I need to shift my behavior.
You think more about action and behavior.
Yes,
you're saying.
Behaviorist. I'm a big time behaviorist.
Are you?
Probably. Yeah, cognitive a little bit more too, but I think I'm like, you need to get into action.
But you think emotions? I mean, there's a phrase that well, hang on, because you were making a point about therapy, and you say you just went back recently.
Oh, just the point that we were talking about in therapy was like basically the therapist is like, you're just completely disconnected from your emotional experience. You need to be more tied into your emotional experience. I'm having like a really hard time with it.
Yeah, right now.
Oh yeah, bro. Yeah. Well, because when we talk about positive affect, there's no problem there.
Yeah.
It's just when negative things happen, I feel them. And I think me and him are a bit having a disconnect because I think I'm more coming from like a philosophical existentialist perspective where I'm like, this is a part of existence. Yeah. I'm going through it. I'm not going to sit in it too long.
That's how the mind reflects on the experience.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, when it's happening, no. This is me in hindsight talking about the reflection.
This is your story about the experience.
When it's happening, it feels uncomfortable. Yeah. I'm like, this sucks, blah, blah, blah. But I can't wallow in self-pity. I don't think that's helpful.
Yeah. Yeah, well, you're thinking about it. It sounds like a sort of in that way of what's productive and what's not productive. Yes. What about music? I mean, you like music, bro?
Love music.
I mean, you love the feelings that music produces?
Love music.
What about sad music? You listen to sad songs?
I listen to sad, low-tempo music at the gym.
Yeah. Okay. And what do you think that's about? Like, why you listen to sad music?
It makes me happy. I don't know.
Does it make you happy? What's the feeling you get from sad music?
It like motivates me to like move forward. I don't know.
Okay, but motivating and making me happy might be different. What's the feeling you get?
I don't know. I think I'd have to listen to something sad.
I mean, most people. Why would you think most people listen to sad music?
Because they're depressed.
But so what? Why do they listen to sad music? Because they're depressed. What does that do?
To evoke that emotion.
Yeah, right. Yeah, drawing out something that felt stuck.
Yeah.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Like it snaps it in a little bit. Like yeah.
So maybe that's why I listen to it when I exercise.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah,
that's where I process it out.
Like release.
Yeah. I didn't even think about that. You did more than my therapist.
Music, man.
Right now.
No, music's a big deal. Well, I've been thinking about a lot. I used to run music groups. I have a friend who has this thing. She says affect first, and she just like planted it in my head amongst many other things. And I take her seriously, And affect first just means like we are feeling creatures first and cognitive creatures second.
Yep.
You know, so when I walk in a room, when I walk in to see you, it's feeling first. That's true. Like that's what we're sizing up.
100%.
That's what we're
100%.
right. So that affective experience is and I bring up music because I think when thinking about emotions, language is such a poor.
You're right.
Medium.
Yep.
But music is a much richer medium, right? Like if I'm trying to express something emotionally, and I have the ability to create music or to put on a song for you and go, this is how I feel. The amount of information in that song is so much more than like sad, happy, blah, 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 right? It's got notes and you know what I mean? It's just.
Well, and it ties in. I actually like that as the example you're talking about because I'm like big on nonverbal communication. Yeah. Music inspires a nonverbal response that in some cases are even out of like the individual's control. Not totally, but you know what I'm saying? Like it gets in your bones.
And so for me, then I go, okay, well, that's interesting to think about emotions that way. Because it means in some sense, like, oh, emotions, if we take music, and music is somehow some kind of expression, a richer expression of an emotional experience, right? Mm-hmm. Well, but it doesn't capture it perfectly, but it's close. It's like, wow, that really like kind of, it can cover so much of the contradiction of feelings I might be feeling. And so like, to me, what that means is like, oh, okay, so like emotions actually are like a much richer language or a much richer phenomenological experience than thinking or talking. And so when we don't sort of, and they're not separate, obviously, thinking and feeling. So when we don't go, okay, I'm feeling and I'm thinking, and we start to think about, oh, these are sort of like these states and experiences that I'm having. Some is like this language state. Some is I'm in my imagination. Some is like a full body, mind, right? An emotion could be body, mind, soul, like all of that, right?
Everything connected.
And have so much experience in it. Well, then it's like, okay, well, you're trying to get in touch with your emotions, and it's like, oh, on some level, I'm trying to get in touch with more of me. Right, just more of me. Ultimately, you know what I'm saying?
And in almost in like a spiritual sense, or like your core, whatever way you want to explain it.
And not for a utilitarian reason for me. Like I was thinking about the videos that I'm doing with Jordan, and one of the sections is called Living Vital. And I think, okay, well, like what are the goals for me as a man in the world, as a father, as a husband, as a friend, as a soldier, if it comes down to it. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. It's like, well, I want ego strength.
Big time.
So I want to be able to hang in there emotionally, physically, spiritually, and stay in there. If I get knocked down, I want to be resilient. I want to be able to get up. Okay, so I want to be strong. God, I want ego strength. I also want to be authentic, right? Like I want to be able to have access to what's really going on with me, which is largely emotional. I mean, it's telling the truth.
Yeah.
Right? But then it's largely like, oh no, I'm sad or I'm happy or I'm grateful. And so like, so much I think of when I'm working with people and I'm working with myself, those are the two spectrums I'm working on. On the one hand, I want that ego strength, discipline, etc. On the other hand, I want vulnerability, vitality, access to my emotions, and authenticity. Because that also is strength. You know what I mean?
100%.
My grandfather talked like Sean Connery. This is his gold chain. This was his gold chain. And he was a tough dude, bro. I mean, he's from New Jersey.
You just give him a little slap.
Bro, no, he was a serious cat, bro. His voice was super deep. He wasn't that tall, but he was just kind of guy you didn't fuck with. And grew up tough and didn't graduate high school and whatever. They used to call him because my dad was out of the house a lot. When I would get in trouble, my mom would call my grandfather and be like, "Talk to your grandfather. Try to get me to chill out. I'm not talking to you." You know what I mean?
Don't put him on the phone.
That. And I never seen him vulnerable, bro. And when my grandma died, they were together since he was 12. When my grandmother died, he cracked. Like, I don't know, 5 days after she passed away, we're all there over there, and he just cracked down the middle. And I never seen somebody crack like that. And him.
Because you've been holding it too long.
And he said, he looked at me, dude, tears filled in his eyes. I mean, he was 85 or something like that. And he said, I always thought I was strong. And I was like, whoa. You know what I mean? In his mind, he had an idea of strong. that was like, you can't crack. And like, you know.
That was him being weak. Yeah.
And I'm like, wow, man. You know, and I don't want that for my kids, man. Like there's something in my son who's 11. I can't remember the term I used. Oh, it was, I remember seeing something in him when he was like 9 or 10, and I was like, oh man, that's funny. He's bashful. I mean, it's not a word I use that much. So it caught my attention because like the word came to me. I was like, oh, he's bashful.
You've seen it non-verbally.
I seen it in his face.
Yeah.
And now he's like transitioning, you know, he's turning 12, teenagers, got cornrows, you know what I mean, into fashion, whatever, phone, you know. I looked at my wife and I'm like, man, I hope you don't lose that bashfulness. You know, not that he could walk around bashful all the time.
I know what you're saying.
But like, so I think about.
There's a sense of innocence from it almost.
And just, you know, there was a Chris that was 2 years old. There was a Yeshaia that was 2 years old. And not that we walk around 2 years old shitting our pants, but like, man, just to be able to have access to all of us in that way, man. Like, to not lose it, you know. So for me, that's wholeness, you know. And I'm like, I don't want him to lose that. I mean, I recognize it can't be the same.
Yeah, no, 100%. You know different iteration of it. Yeah. It's funny you bring that up because all of it said it triggered because.
Who said that?
Huh?
What'd you say?
I said it's funny you said that because it triggered this thing when I was in therapy. I'm not trying to make this about my therapy session, but it was so funny. Because the guy goes inner child work. Yeah. And anytime I hear that shit, I'm like, this is nonsense.
Yeah, interesting.
I can't. I don't like the way it sounds. And the therapist, it was good enough because I'm like, way, you know how I am already. I'm like, hey, bro, like, you just need to shoot straight. Don't worry about therapeutic alliance with me. Just, that'll work easier for you.
Not true, but go ahead.
Yeah. For me.
No, I'm saying not true, but go ahead.
With me?
Yeah.
What do you mean?
He needs a therapeutic alliance. He needs a container.
No. But I'm saying because the reason you are right. Yeah, I agree. Course, but the way I can feel when he gets trepidatious and when he needs to push.
And you don't feel safe.
Well, it's not that I don't feel safe. I'm like, bro, you're too caught up in like if you're gonna offend me now.
No. Anyways, we'll go back. I'll circle back. But get
to your point. Now we're here. Let's go. We're here. This is how it goes.
What I'm hearing you say is there's something that's happening in the relationship with your therapist in those moments where he doesn't trust himself enough, right, to be with you where you are.
Yes.
Right? And in that, I'm saying you don't feel safe because, dude, you got to trust yourself. Like, if I'm going to be here with you, I need to know that you're a solid dude.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's all I'm saying.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Well, and it's funny because then when you say safety, I'm like, no, bro, I feel safe. Calm the fuck down. You know what I mean? That's the funny part. But
it's trust. I mean, safety and trust.
It's trust. It is. No, you're right. Yeah. That's exactly what it is. That's why I was spinning on it. Yeah. But anyways, he brings up the inner child thing, and I'm like anytime anything that sounds over psychopathologized.
But what is that when you go? What's going on there?
Because it's in my opinion. Yeah. I think there's value in it for. Yeah. I think you got to figure out your therapeutic niche. Yeah. Inner child work, psychodrama, whatever it is. I'm not knocking on it. For me, that shit's all nonsense.
No, but that's not what I was asking. What I was asking was why, like, okay, so
why do
you
I have
disagree.
That? Why do I have that?
You disagree with the modality for you. Let's say, fine, that's great. But there was there was a response.
Yeah, like why I detest it so much is because I think a lot of it's made up. I think it's like a Freudian age, like.
Oh man, don't talk about my boy Freud like that.
I know. I hear you. But here's the deal, because we can. Yeah. There's a quote. There's a book called The Undefeated Mind. The quote he always said. I always remember this quote. It's one thing in one book I always remember, but. Our perception of events changes as a direct result of the events that follow.
Yes, correct. Yeah. Correct.
Right?
Yeah.
So for me now, I'm like, oh, my childhood when I was going through all these traumatic experiences, that was good. Yeah. When I was going through them, it wasn't good, bro. Yeah. It was really, really bad. Yeah. You know what I mean? Yeah. So in my mind, I'm going, well, we're trying to synthesize stuff about the past on how that's influencing my behavior, which I do not negate that though. Yeah, I don't negate any of that.
100%. What's happening
100%. Yeah, but when it's, I think it's the aspect of it where it's talked about in this manner that I think for me I view as like kind of hokey. Yeah. And when I see other people do it, I don't knock on it. Just for me, I'm like not doing it.
So, can I
please?
There's a thing that's super interesting, which is fascinating, because I'm going to move from feeling to thinking. And I've been reading this cat who's fucking crazy. Speaking of Freudians, his name is Wilfred Bion. His book is insane, by the way. And Freud talked about this too. Thinking is a coping strategy. I never really got that till recently. Thinking, like, think about this.
I'm going to be thinking about this for the next.
Dude, no, this is trippy. If we're organisms, right? We're biological organisms, we're mammals. And a lot of our behaviors are adaptive so we can navigate our environment, and both our social environments and our physical environments, right? And so we have all of these strategies to cope and deal with frustration and challenge.
I'm going socially, there already.
Right?
You're opening up stuff.
So from Beyond's point of view and from Freud's point of view, thinking evolved as a means to cope with things, right? So when you're having a hard time, you might go, well, you're like having a hard time, so you might go, well, I need to think about that. Well, what do you mean when you say that? We say, well, I need to think about that because thinking actually will regulate my nervous system and allow me to work through something, right? So there's a developmental age when we learn how to think in language and talk like that. He calls it, he says we got beta elements. Beta elements are these unprocessed images, emotions, and experiences, sensory experiences that we have that are just floating around the psyche. Then he says there's an alpha function, which is it's like a stomach. It metabolizes beta elements, but it's in the mind, and it metabolizes it into alpha elements, right? And alpha elements are thoughts that allow me to be with something without it over frustrating and overwhelming me. And so for me, it's interesting. Like I had this with a client yesterday when somebody's, when you're like, I'm not going there with the inner child. And I go, well, it's interesting. Is it challenging for you to think about it? Like to really think about it as a serious modality, right? Because the initial response is like, not only do I not want to do it, like I'm not even going to take the time to think about it. And so to me, this indicates a beta element. I mean, it indicates something in the psyche that's unprocessed and that doesn't, that feels overwhelmed by the thought of even going there in thought deeply and taking something seriously. I had this with a client the other day where he was really able to, he's psychotic. He's grandiose, delusional, narcissistic, and psychotic. And I was like testing his ego strength to see, like, because psychotic people, they shoot off into psychosis instead of dealing with feeling. And so I was seeing like how much feeling he could hold. And he was having a thing between him and another person. And I was like, no, do you hate the person? But I want you to think about it. Think about it before you answer me. And he stayed and he goes, I'm not sure. And he wasn't psychotic. I was like, okay, we're here. And I said, do you love the person? And he thought about it. And he goes, I'm not sure. So he could do it about another person, thinking about his feelings without being psychotic and going to God or whatever. Then I said, hey, man, do you have any part, like 0.1%, what, like the smallest part in the world in having made this situation a little worse than one you're really upset about with this person? And he goes, no. I go, nothing. Now I happen to know he's got maybe more than 50%, but I'm like, no, not at all. No. I'm like, well, would you think about it? Would you be willing to think about it? He goes, I don't need to think about it. I go, well, could you though? Like, I don't even need to because you already know. But like, if we just stayed here for a minute, could you think about it? He goes, no, I'm not going to think about it. I'm like, you're not going to think about it? I'm like, does that make you curious if there's something that you're not even willing to think about? He's like, that doesn't make me curious.
Yeah.
And I'm like, oh, right. And then I realized that me too. Like, I'm stressed out about something. I'm like, baby, my wife, because I'm always with my wife. My wife goes, she's this, fires, this, stuff. I'm like, I don't want to think about that. Like, I want to think about it. You know what I mean? Don't overwhelm me. So I think it's interesting to challenge that because you like to think, right? Because you're saying that. Like, I'm not worried about feelings. I want, like, what's practical? Well, thinking about inner child work, hey, tell me about it, therapist.
Yeah, and but this was where the conversation ended up going to, was I basically was like, because here, this kind of ties into like unconscious mechanisms. Why I do X, Y, Z, blah 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 blah. Yeah. But and digging up the unconscious, right? We need to go explore that. Yeah. My mentor was an evolutionary psychologist, Dr. Schwipper. Schwartz was his name before. It's Schwipper now. Like, I love this guy.
Yeah. What happened? He changed his name.
Yeah, he got married. He changed his last name. He's like the best human though ever. I still talk to him. Yeah, great. I still talk to him. Great. He's my rabbi Marine Fiddler, guy. You know what I mean? Yeah, cool. So I still talk to him, and my whole thing is like, because I think of it in the way of, you did a good thing about how you're talking to it, because it works with my schema about evolutionary adaptations. Yeah. And in my mind, I go, well, we also evolved a mechanism to bury shit.
That's true.
And sometimes
that's true.
It don't make sense to open it back up. I think my schema is so centered around like the past being dead. At times, I do need to go open up that box, especially if something is plaguing me in an instance. But for the most part, I'm calm, cool, collected, happy, feel good about my existence. Why would I go open up all that shit? Yeah. It don't make sense to me.
Well, I guess here's if I would have...
No, let's go.
We're both in recovery, so we both have histories. You've got a much deeper history, it sounds like, in the system going back really, really young. It's a totally different experience than me.
Totally.
You know what I mean? Which I respect. I mean, meaning I have a reverence and a care for a young kid, you now as an adult, having gone through that. I mean that.
Yeah,
you know what I
mean? I know you, so that's the good thing.
Let me see how I get this. No, never mind.
Say it.
No, I didn't quite.
It's not there?
Yeah.
Because I looked at my phone?
No. I was trying to... Where were we at before? You were saying...
we've been bouncing around.
You were talking about burying something. And then I was...
Child.
Yeah.
Inner child work. We can move on to coercion right now if you want to, though.
That's really sweet. I hope it comes back, because there was something that
it
was a real curiosity about you. Something about you burying something in the past.
Well, when we were talking about burying stuff in the past, I was talking about evolutionary adaptations, about stuff being buried. And I think that at a certain point...
Sometimes you say stay in the past, and I agreed with that.
And then there's a time where you have to...
Oh, I remembered. I was going to ask, because we're both in recovery. And I wonder, because this is something this has like been my whole thing in the last few months, just like really thinking about guilt and shame and how it operates, and studying psychoanalysis, which has been like kind of really tripped me out, man, for which we should talk about. But do you have a sense of some of what's operating in the background of your life being you have a debt that needs to be paid? Like as an unconscious program.
Yeah, 100%. I actually, there's a even thing I talk about is like, I view, this is like a joke.
Yeah.
But I view everyone has to go to hell.
Yeah.
You know, I don't even really believe in hell, but the point is, and I go, you know, at this point, I probably got like 400 years, and you know, out of an eternity, I can probably do that standing on my head.
Okay.
You know what
That's
I mean?
great.
Like,
you do it better than me, probably.
But the narrative feeds into what you're saying, right? That's kind of just what I throw out there.
I'm a bad guy. I'm going to hell.
Yes.
So
I was a horrible human.
Yeah. So I think for me, when I think about inner child work or IFS or any of these sort of, they're kind of out there to me. I mean, when you get into that work, the interesting experience of that work, because I've done some of it, is it's out there. Like it's, for me, it's almost a dangerous modality.
Define out there.
When I've done IFS work, okay? IFS often with your eyes closed and you're working in your imagination, right? Inner child work often you're working in the imaginal, in this space. Those experiences coming out of the unconscious, outside of your agency and control to a large degree, the emotions that they carry when they release, or when they occur, are nothing like other talk therapy experiences. You're like, whoa, like you just don't realize until you, it's sort of like, put some eye shades on, wrap yourself in a blanket, and eat 4 grams of mushrooms, having never eaten 4 grams of mushrooms, in like a state where you're actually going to go inside. You're like, oh, whatever opinions I had about my inner life
are gone.
I have no idea what I was talking about. You know what I mean? So to me, that type of work, when you feel, actually, I would say when you feel safe enough, that the defenses soften and what's under there comes up, it's
gnarly. Yeah.
It's deep, bro. I mean, it's I would almost say infinitely deep, which is wild. Like Jung wasn't planned.
Well, no, that was right when you started talking about that, and I'm glad you segued into like psychedelics. Yeah. But the one thing he said about psychedelics, which I think ties into what you're talking about in terms of the deep child work, is like, beware of unearned knowledge.
Yeah, exactly right. That's interesting. but even that to me, those are interesting, fear-based. I mean, I can make an argument for that. But I used to be like that in recovery too. Where I'm like, you have to earn your recovery. I'm not saying that people generally don't have to work through stuff in order to have stuff stay with them and be stable and true in their lives. I mean, I think that is, generally true. But I also think a lot of the time, as therapists, as clinicians, as people working in recovery, there's so much projection that we have because of our 100%. Guilt and debt that we're like, you need to do, but there's a lot happening in people, man, that's difficult to predict. There's probabilities. You and I would be pretty good. You line up 10 people. We might predict 100%. We might predict 90%, based on what somebody was doing, what their recovery would look like. And then then there's surprises.
There's always surprises, but me and you have worked on a few cases together. Me and you have talked about how the case is going to play out.
You know what we don't know shit about? What somebody's like in 5 years.
You're right about that. 100%.
That's like, oh.
Yeah, the short term. We have a good 3-6 months to a year.
Yeah, we can get it, man. We know when somebody's like, man, you're exactly. Coercion. I was thinking about this, man, because I was thinking about the difference in the models and the treatment programs that we started.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about speaking about it publicly and saying publicly the admiration that I've had for your program, and even wanting to say out loud that we had a young guy at my program who was really traumatized. And who the trauma was so bad, his body was like this, and he was borderline, and he's you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And we said we tried every modality, and it was kind of interesting. I remember I was talking to my mom, and from my mom's point of view, the programs that have black and white boundaries are more trauma informed, which is intriguing.
Really?
Yeah, because a lot of the time, that's what you need to feel safe if you're traumatized. You need to know exactly where the lines are. That's why a lot of
Yeah, it makes sense.
That's why a lot of traumatized people go to Pacific Group or they go to Fellowship of the Spirit.
Predictability.
Right? They want that. They want the predictability.
Mm-hmm.
But we have all kinds of projection on these various modalities for various reasons in the field. Fine. But it was still kind of felt like a risk to send them to you guys, but we didn't really have anything to lose.
There's no one then. Yeah, there's not at this point. Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, let's try it. Let's see what goes on.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember 6 months later, he came out and his body was different. I mean, he had transformed. He had become a person in recovery. He's still sober.
I know.
But his body changed. I was doing breath work with him, and the breath work wouldn't get it, bro.
Yeah.
But the self-esteem, the community, you know what I mean? The
social
spirit
model
of the place, what you guys did changed the muscle fascia in his trauma, right? So anyway, needless to say, I have a lot of respect for what you do. I've also worked with people that have been traumatized.
100%. I know.
But I was thinking, okay, well, what's going on there? And this is what I wanted to know. So almost everybody that goes to either of our programs is coerced. My place may be lighter coercion. Your place may be heavier, but coercion in both, 90% of the time.
Uh-huh.
And I'm thinking about the person that gets coerced into your place and that where they can get injured. I'm not even going to get into the specific types of injury, but I'd be interested to talk about. But where they can get injured is if and when they don't buy in.
100%.
Right? Like, there's something about, like, if somebody, what's happening in your place is nothing. Meaning, it's not climbing Mount Everest.
Yeah.
It's not like being in the Amazon jungles. It's not like getting dropped off in the hood and being homeless. It's like, wake up on time, make your bed, do the dishes, cook your food, go to bed. You know what I mean? It's like, what is the trauma?
Yeah, we're not even doing the old crazy shit where we'd be like shaving people's heads, making them wear signs. We're not doing any of that.
Like, where's the trauma, right? Like, that's not the military. People go to the military all the time, like voluntarily. And so for me, there was something about the person who never makes the choice before, doesn't make the choice during, even worse when they're not successful after that, right?
Yep.
But still have like a little bit of a thing, even if they do stay sober, because of things that happened in the experience of not being in control. And so I was curious what you thought, like, because on the one hand, I'm like, there's really nothing traumatic going on, but there's something about being forced to do something and the public being seen, embarrassment, shame, guilt, right? Yep. Like somebody seeing my shame or seeing my disappointment or seeing my inadequacies. That where the risk is, but that risk is okay if you choose it. So like I think about David Goggins. I was talking about this in one of the videos. And I was thinking about his transformational experience based on what I know of his story. And I was like, okay, this is a guy who exposed himself to himself. to motivate himself.
Mm-hmm.
Like one day he's like, I'm not going to lie to myself anymore. I'm going
fat,
to face,
I'm
going to open up all my demons.
Yeah.
And those demons opened up. I'm sure it was a deep experience for him. And it fueled him to become a resilient warrior, you know, or whatever he is in some sense. But I think, wow, what would his experience have been like if 2 years before somebody had tried to make him become David, like make him exposed versus him going, I did, right? Like, would he have gone to the Navy SEAL training 3 times, or would he have quit the first time because he had, you know, like the choice piece?
The perfect storm of what actually took place and the nuance in terms of what got him to become
exactly
Goggin.
right. And it's the same thing with me, but it's different because we're so soft, basically.
Yeah.
You know, although I can be a wolf.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
100%.
But it made me think about in your model the emphasis that should be, and I don't know if you do this or not, I haven't been there, but the emphasis that should be placed on you choosing this. Hey, I want you to know this is never going to work if you don't choose it. Like, choose it. Like, you're going to be traumatized by this place if you don't choose to join it. You know what I mean? You know what I'm saying? Like, I wonder about how you thought about that.
You're 100% correct. I started, like, when I took over the program, it'll be 10 years in June.
Mazel tov, right?
I started to implement things. Like, you remember, you went to Beit Teshuva and stuff. Do you remember, like, I don't know if they did this at Beit Teshuva. I only know what my experience was, but I assume they did.
Yeah.
You know how, like, the program works, but, like, you don't really talk to the clients themselves about how this is actually working. You don't talk to the clients about how the social model, how you being in the hot
That's interesting
seat.
Too. I'm curious about that.
You don't communicate that with them.
Yeah.
I started to go, we need to tell them how the social dynamic is influencing them, because the same social dynamic that you're dealing with in the context of this system, you're going to have to deal with out in the real world.
Well, and for people that information allows for a deeper sense of safety, allows them to buy in more.
100%.
Right? Like, which not everybody, but for some people, information is like, oh yeah, like I'm like that.
Well, and I got into the point where I was like, oh, because I saw so many guys wash out and all this other stuff kind of going on. I basically was like, you know what we need to do is I would be like, hey, check it out. Listen, you can come here coerced. You can come here, your parents forcing you, whatever.
Sure, yeah.
And that might work for the first 3 to 4, maybe 5 months. But if you don't figure out how to buy in at around in that 6-7 month mark, we're just going to move you on because it's not going to work here for you. And we're actually going to kind of create a dynamic where you're a captive audience. And I think that
when you say that dynamic where you're a captive audience, what do you mean in this context?
I mean, they're always a captive audience when they come in, is in the sense of your parents are paying us to provide a service for you, whereas your parents paying for us to provide a service for you that you want.
Yes.
Like one is you don't want it. One is like you go, oh shit, I lost 15 pounds. I'm starting to have confidence in myself. These guys put me on a program. We have a guy on a program right now. He has to get a date set up by Valentine's Day. It was like the joke in the house.
That's great,
and you got to go on a date.
Yeah, great.
You got to get a date set up.
Yeah,
which is like, everyone's like, what does that have to do with recovery?
Everything.
You know how much anxiety you have?
Bro.
Lack of self-efficacy, assurance.
All of it.
So I think those are things where the essence of ethos hasn't changed, but our approach has changed dramatically. And it's, the crazy thing about this is, I called my mentor Brad.
Yeah.
You know Brad.
Yeah.
You know who Brad is?
Which one? What's that?
Keith. Brad Keith.
I know. Not well, but yeah, I know.
So I called Brad, and I'm having a conversation. I talk to him all the time now. And I'm like, I said, if you saw how I operated the house now, you'd probably be beside yourself. Like, you wouldn't approve of it. And he goes, well, why do you think? And I go, like back in the days when guys would bounce after like 6 months, and what we'll do with a lot of those guys still is we'll put them on non-com with the house. Because usually there's a blowout. There's a blowout. They're disrespectful to management, whatever. We're like, hey, you guys can't talk to this guy. We don't want them influencing the community in a negative way.
Got it,
And I go, but here's the deal. I said, the only thing that I've changed is I maintain contact with those guys. And if they hit a year recovery, I let them come back into the community and be a part of the community.
Yeah, that's cool.
And he goes like this. He goes, you know what? He's like, you're doing it right.
Yeah.
He goes, we fucking probably fucked up so many guys
Yeah,
because here's the deal.
Yeah.
Even those guys who blew out formed significant relationships in that 6 months because
rupture.
Yes, significant relationships. And for me, I'm like, well, it's one of those things like in like 12-step culture. Me and you've had a lot of conversations about this. Like there's nuance to 12-step culture. I love 12-step culture, totally believe in it. I also think there's a lot of hypocrisy and bullshit. You know, we'll love you until you can love yourself, but don't do this. And if you do this, you're pariah. Yeah. And I think for me, I spent a lot of time, it's been 16 years operating a very similar modality of program. Yeah. And when I took it over, I was like, we'll be sitting telling the guys to be open-minded about their experience in the program, but we're not open-minded to change. We're not open-minded to changing things. We're not open-minded to approaching things in a different way. Even to the point now where I remember like Sublocade and stuff like that came in. I was like, no, we'll take someone on Sublocade now. I would have never taken anyone on Sublocade. And if someone would have said it to me, I'd been like, you're a fucking idiot. Totally. You know? But if the goal is to get people, I just think for so long, my marker of change was abstinence. You have to be abstinent. I'm like, the marker of change in my mind is quality of life. I don't care if people stay sober anymore, bro. It ain't my business.
Well, so listen, sobriety doesn't have any value. I mean, to me, I've said this forever. Sobriety is a means, not an end.
Yeah, I agree.
I could care less in fact, I like wine. I would love to smoke a joint. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
It doesn't bother me. It's it's a means to living, right? To healing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, man. I was thinking about. I was just talking to Wiz.
I loved it. I loved it.
And Melanie Klein, who's a Freudian, she has a schema, like the way and I think it's great. We would love it, like, because I don't love a lot of the diagnostic categories are important to communicate amongst clinicians, right? But I like a framework that has like how would you put it? A schema that allows you to place different people on it at different points, meaning like an all-encompassing schema for mental health.
It's like almost Maslow's hierarchy of needs, like something that's moving.
Yeah, exactly. Well,
not like that. But I know what you're saying.
So here's her thing. And I won't do the whole long version. I'll do the short version. But she talks about the paranoid schizoid position and the depressive position, and she's thinking about that. Paranoid schizoid position is babies, infants. And we could talk about why, but it basically means they're binary. So there's heaven and hell. There's envy and rage and aggression and anger, and there's everything is good. And that's baby's basic like emotional palette and distinction. But for her, she calls it good breast, bad breast, because babies are only aware of, oh, I got a breast, everything is good. There's no breast. Envy, rage, aggression, come in to fill in that absence.
Yeah.
So she says, okay, this is like the beginning of thought, but thought in the very broad sense of the word. And then we make more and more nuanced distinctions. So she says, as we develop, we're able to see more ambiguity in the world. We're able to understand complexity. We're able to move into the gray. She goes, starts black and white, and it moves into the gray. Paranoid, schizoid to depressive. Depressive is not depressed. It actually just means being in depressed reality. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Reality is depressing, right? Okay, fine. And when we regress, when I'm angry, for instance, if I get angry, I regress down that split. And so I move from like whole, being able to go, man, I love Chris, man, that's my homie, to like, fuck, you disagree with me about something that's important, to go, man, fuck Chris, he's good, bad. Is Chris gonna try to hurt me if I say that? You know, is I gonna try to hurt Chris, right? Like I start to split off, and the world becomes like this, right? So if you think about paranoid psychosis, a paranoid psychosis is when the world becomes a predator and I become prey. That's why paranoid people always think the CIA are after me. Yeah. Like, why does he think the CIA is that? Like, come on, right? And so we're coming into recovery. Everybody who comes into recovery is split. We're pretty far down that pole. I mean, we might not be paranoid psychotic. We might be paranoid and psychotic, but we're not far from it in terms of like how we trust relationally, in terms of the amount of projection that's happening in the outside world, the amount of projection that's happening ourselves, and our ability to reality test and go, okay, you know what? I'm just like a guy with a substance abuse issue who's like a little bit out of my gourd, and the world's a complicated place, but one day at a time. Like, we don't think like that. Yeah. We're coming in hot and frazzled and split. And so when you're that split, you don't have an ability to think, integrate, and feel the nuance of things. And so you're rigid. Yeah. So you're rigid, right? So you're coming in and you're like, nah, ain't no Suboxone, ain't no this. That is to incorporate that into your schema is too threatening. Because you want to get high and you don't know
I agree.
How quickly you'll switch from here to here, right? And so you're like, I can't even.
It has to be black and white to help build a foundation.
For most people. Not for everybody, but for most people that are split like that, and most people are split like that. And then as we all grow in health, like your mentor, who's like, you're doing it right when you didn't think he'd say that, but he's grown.
Yeah.
He's like, oh no, I see now. I've integrated more understanding, right, of what's necessary. That there's a protective time period, but you don't want to create a permanent rupture with somebody for reasons when the risk is low.
Yeah.
Right. It's just a more nuanced opinion about it.
Well, and I think also his perspective is shaped by the fact that he did go out. He just came back too. So like a lot of that, he got to see the receiving end. Yeah. Actually, I don't think he saw any of it, to be frank. And I don't think he even probably gave a shit, but he knows it existed. Yeah. People talking shit or whatever it is.
Like what it's like to feel shit.
Well, yeah, because you're like the guy who's like, you could imagine if I went out tomorrow, what people would, there would be people who would be like, I knew that was going to happen. Chris fucking telling everyone how to live their life.
Yeah.
What the fuck's wrong with you?
Yeah, it's interesting when you're talking about like when you brought up AA, and I was thinking about this when I was with David yesterday. I was like, it's so interesting. I mean, this is my own adaptive stuff. When I look at and I don't know if you're like this because we never were really in the same AA circles, but when I look at my relationship to AA, and I've always considered myself a member of 12 Steps. I never had an issue with it other than the first time I was 17. I just didn't like sitting for an hour. But I always was like, oh, it's free, it's cool, like smoke a cigarette. Like I just never, it never bothered me for whatever reason. But I never really joined either. I mean, I worked all 12 Steps. I had a sponsor, but like I never attached my
identity.
Well, I would say I never trusted belonging in a group in Alcoholics Anonymous in any way where if there was a rupture that I would be hurt. So I think that was my defenses. I also got my girlfriend pregnant at 22 and started a family, and so I had my own thing going really young. But I never had a gang in AA. I always went to AA, but I never had a crew in AA. And so I never was in any of the AA drama. I never got gossiped about in AA. I never gossiped about anybody else in AA. I just never dealt, like I never was, I went to meetings. I worked steps.
People knew you.
I would go Westside Pavilion. So I'm with all the 40-year-old guys. Yeah. I always had sponsors like 20 years older than me.
Joe and all those guys.
I worked my steps and whatever else. And I never like clicked up. I just never did it. And honestly, I feel really good about it.
I'd say
22 years later, I feel really good about it, bro.
No, interesting.
But I always had treatment. So I did do it at Beit Shuva. But even at Beit Shuva, which I was there for 12 years, you know what I mean? I grew up there. Like a lot of people grew up in AA. So I had Beit Shuva, which was like a home. But even there, I always in my mind went, hey man, like you're an individual amongst a group. And so just know there's things probably will come to an end. And like, so do not fully surrender to this group. And I would make the argument, brother, I've never fully surrendered to any group. And so I've never really had a rupture with a group because I've always sort of just been in it, but really internally somewhat like peripheral. You know what I mean?
Interesting. I actually feel like as you're saying it, I was like, this is exactly what I've done in AA. Yeah. It's not literally no different. Yeah. And people know me and know that I'm 12-step, but I've never, as you're saying it, I was thinking about, well, I went to Knuckleheads back in Venice, but I wasn't a part of Knuckleheads. Like if you ask the Knucklehead main people, I know who all the main people were. You weren't sleeping with homeboy's girlfriend. You didn't sleep with yours. No. You're right. I never even thought about it like that. I never even thought about it like that.
Yeah. Which is interesting, you know. Like I think it's interesting. So like circling back to the woke conversation thing. So I think for me it's the same thing.
Yep.
I'm not in either tribe, dude. Like I'm not in Israel and Palestine. Like I'm a Jew. I had a fucking dream. This is crazy, bro. I was talking to my Jewish homie, and he's very pro-Israel, very hawkish. And I really don't like people getting killed, bro. And I particularly don't like poor brown people getting killed. So I'm just offended by the idea. But I'm a Jew, so I'm not. And I was literally like, he was like happy about what's going on. And I kind of ran down on him, you know what I mean, verbally. And that night I went to sleep, bro. This is a trippy thing. And in my dream, there was like a shadowy figure. It looked kind of like, remember that cartoon Gargoyles? You ever see that cartoon?
Yeah.
It looked like kind of like a shadow, like a gargoyle or something like that.
Disney, I think, yeah.
I don't remember. And it reached and it put a badge on my shoulder in my dream, like. And I knew it was like, for as a Jew, like you're on, you know. And I said in my dream, I said, I'm not sure, right? And this thing said, I'm not asking. Or I didn't ask. And this was and I woke up. And so I was like, okay. Like for me after the dream, I'm like, okay, I guess if it goes down, I'm on Israel team, but I'm very conflicted about it. I'm probably a mediocre soldier, you know what I mean? Like, okay, 100%. I'm on team Israel. If and when something happens, I've been tasked to fight for my people. Okay, I'm not happy about it. You know, I want to be killing, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
but
of course.
Anyways, I guess the point is that positioning that we were talking about, like in AA, is similar in, you know, thinking about what does it mean for Donald Trump to be president? What does it mean to identify the fact that I have compassion for people, that I am educated in mental health, that gender dysphoria is a real thing, that even if it's an identity issue that somebody's going through and they're confused about their gender, but it's not gender dysphoria, can I have compassion for that? And I was like, trans, like the way they throw the word transgender around.
Yeah, it's not
I'm like, yo, the way you're throwing the word immigrant around, I'm like, yo, dude.
It's
like,
not okay.
Guess what, bro? If I was with the immigrant homie and you threw the word around like that in a tunnel, bro, you better be able to whoop my ass. Like just throwing words around like that about humans?
Yeah.
The way they talk about Jews online? Bro, I had no idea. I'm not online that much. Bro, the way that they talk about Jewish people online. You know what I mean?
It's crazy.
I mean, the stuff for me. So I'm compassion, man. Like love, compassion. You know what I'm saying? Love. Like what is going on? You know what I mean? And on the other hand, yeah, I get it, and I also get it, and I also get what's happened in the last 15 years. But both are true. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, but do you ever think it's interesting because you and I have always had a really good relationship. You and I share a lot of similar perspectives on the world. Maybe. We branch off, but we're okay holding space if we don't see it exactly the same way. Do you ever feel, and again, phenotypically, it's more recognizable in you, but I grew up in a mixed race home.
Yeah, sure.
You grew up. Do you ever feel like...
That's a great question, man.
No. Because when we were meeting, I was like, I feel like this is like a reasonable thing to bring up because it's interesting because a lot of like the woke stuff and like...
Yeah, that's a great point.
Like a lot of people don't know this, but like when I was at SMC, 2012, I won Sidney Gardfarb Outstanding Black Collegian Award.
That's great.
People will trip out on that.
Yeah.
Why? Yeah. How did you do that?
Yeah.
And one of my homies who was there, he was busting up laughing. There were four of us who won it. The two other people were like, why the fuck is he here?
Sure. For what, though? What was you doing?
My GPA. I was a scholars program, and I had done that.
Of course, the white black guy wins.
Yes, of course. You know what I mean? But it was one of those things. But what people don't understand is my brother, who you look like color-wise like my brother. Yeah. My brother was like, you better check that fucking box everywhere you go, bro. Because my grandmother had so much shame from Oklahoma, left. Yeah. We don't even know who my grandfather is.
A lot of people are from Oklahoma, too.
Oh, really?
Maybe we're cousins, bro.
Yeah, that's why I got the DNA test.
Yeah, man.
But it's one of those things where it's always a weird thing because even, listen, my whole life.
That's a great point, bro.
My whole life, even recently, 2 years ago, I'm out in Atlanta and people were in the sauna, me and this one dude, and we're like talking and we start talking. He's like, man, are you mixed?
Yeah.
And I'm like, yeah, my mom's black. And then he goes like this. He goes, oh, nigga. I was like, nah. I go, me and my brother, when me and my brother talk, I'll say that because it's just how I grew up.
Yeah.
But then he's like, nah, you got to say it. I was like, all right, man. Yeah. And this is just a random dude in Atlanta. Sure. So it's a weird thing for me because I don't have like, and I've seen it play out when we were in the, I'll finna wrap this up real quick, but when I got sober, we went out to Nickerson Gardens. You know what Nickerson Gardens projects are. Yeah. We get out there, it's all white boys in the house, bro. There's no one who's and Nickerson Gardens, like you're not out there after dark, bro. It slaps different out there.
Trying to get some charm.
You know what I mean? It is. And these fools, it was a trip because we were going door to door. We're like with the church, you know?
Wow.
And I was like, they were joking around because this woman, the baby ran out and like came to me and she's like, pick him up.
Yeah.
And they're like, motherfucking Chris up in here thinks he's Bill Clinton.
Yeah.
Like, picking up babies and stuff. I'm like, no, but they're humans. Like, I don't have like the weird but these guys were very anxious around black people, bro. It was like abundantly clear. And then it was funny. This kid who was in the sober living, I'll never forget it. Like, there were some kids out on the stoop, younger, 16, and like I'm joshing. I'm like talking shit, And then the kid came up and was trying to like be cool, and he's like, nah, bro. Like that's all. Yeah. It's fake, you know?
I want to say something about your mixed question, because I think you're asking
sorry.
To be mixed.
I digress.
But no, you digressed to something that I wanted to say out loud, and I was just thinking about this recently. I think the thing that was interesting, like around politically, is that I generally have been against diversity, equity, inclusion as it has existed in the last 10 years.
5 years? Has it been 10?
I mean, whatever it is.
The explosion, whatever.
When they taught cultural competency, my KDAT class in 2003, I thought that was great.
Yeah.
And then it felt like it grew deeper and deeper. So we never implemented recovery integrity, even though I'm a Brown treatment program owner. Because I was like, I'm not going there. I'm like, I already know what's going on. But I have to say, when he comes into office and they cut everything, I was offended. Right now, I don't know how much is projection.
Yeah.
I mean, some of it's projection. I'm like, it's okay if I don't want it. But man, it makes me really confused when Jamie Vance or Trump or, you know what I mean? The guy from
blanket statement.
Right? Like when they're like, no, merit-based. I'm like, well, I don't believe you. You know, so there's part of me that maybe projects, you don't even have the right
to do that
kind of thing as somebody who doesn't get it. But that could be my split, my projecting on these people. Like, well, why doesn't he have the right? He's the president. He does have the right. What's your problem? On the other hand, having been on YouTube, if it's not all Russian bots or whatever, the amount of, I think I really underestimate actually the amount of racism, hatred, envy, anti-Semitism that actually just exists right under the surface still. I think I really underestimated it, bro.
Under the surface where?
Of the psyche, of people's psyches, right? Like and I don't mean racist. Like, I think in some way somebody could be racist and married to a black person, and that to me is weird but true. You know what I mean? Yeah. I know that's odd, but
no,
like, the human psyche can be that way,
not.
Right?
I don't think.
And
it's weird.
I actually bumped into a skinhead before I got sober. I'll never forget this shit because I tricked out. I couldn't get in this bar. I was with somebody, but I had a fake ID or whatever. I couldn't get in the bar, and it was like deep in the valley, and I never went to like bars deep in the valley. And it was Mexicans, and it was bikers
Sun Valley,
and Nazis.
It's probably
and shit, basically.
And shit, yeah.
So I'm sitting out in this bar, and there's a big ass dude, fully tatted. I'm like 17, 18 years old, something like that. And he's like, "What's going on, man?" He's like, "What's up with you?" And he goes like, "What ethnicity?" I'm like, "What do you mean, what ethnicity, man?" And he had a hyena, bro. He had a Mexican chick. And he's like, "Man, what are?" And I was like, "Fuck." I was like, "I'm black and Jewish, bro. Man, what's up?"
Yeah, double whammy.
And he goes like this, and he pulls, and he's got a swastika, bro. I wasn't even trying to get down. Dude would have killed me. But I was like, what? And I'm looking at this dude, and I'm looking at him, I go, is that your lady, bro? I'm like, ain't she Mexican? I'm like, how you gonna show me a swastika? And you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I'm like, wow. But that to me is a human psyche. But I think what I didn't realize is we know, both in the Democratic and the Republican Party, in different ways, there's a large percentage of layers of these people's psyche that have been really frustrated with having to be guilty in trying to create some kind of reparation for what happened in this country. And when finally somebody said, you ain't got to be guilty no more, which I get. Nobody wants to walk around guilty. I don't either. And I never thought it was a good strategy in the first place. So I agree. Let go of the guilt. I don't think it's helpful. You know what I mean? So I agree with all of it. At the same time, I'm like, but there was about 30% of them with certain stuff in their psyche that they're like, yeah, and we can't wait to make you pay. You know what I mean?
100%,
so there was like the piece of me that's like that, you know, that's like, and hey man, it's human life, it's history, you know, this is what it is. But to your point about being mixed, it makes me think about Moses. If we go, I mean, that's weird.
Yeah, biblical. I got what you're saying.
But Moses, he was born an Israelite. Was put in the boat, whatever, put in the raft down the river, and then he was raised as an Egyptian. So he was a mixed guy, right? He was like up to
culturally, he's mixed. Yeah,
totally right. He was an Egyptian.
Yeah,
but genetically, he was an Israelite. And like whatever, at one of the pinnacles of the story, he sees a Egyptian guard beating.
Yeah, I remember this.
Beating an Israelite, and something happens in him, And he goes to protect and he kills the guard. And then he becomes a fugitive and he takes off. And then he gets called on to lead the people out of the, et cetera, et cetera. But like, he could never really join like he wasn't really an Israelite. So he's leading these people and the people kind of trust him. Like they're kind of like, because he's like with God, but they don't. And so they're constantly rebelling against this guy. And he's like, he belongs to them, but he doesn't belong to them. Yeah. So he's like in this position of being a part of, but not being a part of. So I think, and I think if you look in history, like think about even rappers. I'm a big hip hop guy. Think about Tupac, right? Like, that's interesting. I'm like, what's different about Tupac's background? Well, man, Tupac got an interesting background, man. Like,
very interesting.
Black Panthers, like he was poor, but he went to art school in Baltimore, and he was. I got a picture in my office of a client who was in school with Tupac for 4 years. Like, he was Tupac's best friend, little white Jewish kid. They went to art school with him in Baltimore. It sits on my desk. Yeah. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So he had this kind of like, I'm a part of, but like a little bit different of experience. And so I think being mixed, it was true. I never belonged to a group because I had to choose in the 80s. Like, they didn't hang out with each other. That's why drugs were helpful.
That's the same.
Right? It was like, like I had to choose, you know what I mean? Now, on the one hand, I wanted to be black, fully black, because the black folks were tougher and cooler when I was growing up. You know what I mean? Like, they were the most popular.
This is a funny thing. I mean, it's interesting having this conversation with you because I feel like I could be saying some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Because we grew up in Burbank.
Yeah.
There's I think I've told you this story. You probably don't remember it. There's like my brother, because if in Burbank in the 90s, there's 5 black people in Burbank. It ain't like now. It's a little bit more, but there was not black people. Yeah. So they either hung out at our house or like one of the other people's house. But they're always at my house. My brother's 10 years older than me. My brother's 49 right now. You know what I mean? Yeah. And when you're that young, 8, 9 years old, that's the Messiah, bro. I didn't have a dad around. My mom was schizoaffective. Wow. And so the only thing I was around was black people. Yeah. And my brother was hardcore in the Cross Colors, Malcolm X. Like it was bumping deep, and he was like
in Burbank, and he grew up in Burbank too.
Oh yeah, hardcore. And he was always like, "We're black. You're black. You're black. You're half
Where
black."
did that come from him? Or just out of curiosity?
I think because, I mean, we'd have to ask him. Maybe one day we'll have him out here on the podcast, because you would like. I feel like my brother would be like a good person for all of us to vibe out in a conversation with. I think part of it had to do with maybe like my mom abandoning him. In my opinion, like there's some abandonment shit there, and then feeling like maybe because I was also viewed by my mom as the golden child. I'm the fucking white one. You know what I mean? I think in my opinion, I think that's probably something going on in there. But and when he would get pissed off at me, he's like, "You're adopted. Look at mom. You don't look like her. Wow. You look like grandma, but you don't look like mom." Like, because it's just like I'm being a nightmare. But to get back to the story, because I was so. Oh yeah, we're half black, and I'm watching them. These guys are modeling for me. They were in the room joshing, bullshitting, and they kicked me out of the room. I'm like 9, 10 years old, something like that. I don't know however old I was, 12, whatever. And I'm like stewing outside the door, and there's like 5 guys in there. I kick the door open. I walk in, and I scream out, "Power to the black!" And these motherfuckers just hit the ground, bro. They couldn't. They're like, the white boy is tripping. You know what I mean? Wow, it was just like, but
that's a great moment, bro.
I did. No, my brother will laugh about it still to this day. Moment, no, it was. But I never felt outside of that. Is the weirdest part.
Yeah, you're in it.
You know what I mean? It's like I'll see like white guys who live. It happens. I feel like sometimes in the South, they just grow up around black people, and they are
toughest white boys in the world.
Yeah, and they're welcomed into the culture as if like they're a part of.
I think so. I mean, race is such a
weird thing.
But I think, it's funny. I was having a conversation with my sisters, and I've always identified as mixed.
Same.
Period. I just like mixed, and I like identifying as mixed because it feels like the most truthful. You know what I mean? But my sister was saying something to me about my sister. Is online has like lightweight celebrity status or whatever, and somebody had
the designer, right? Yeah.
And somebody had said, I don't remember if this was on a comment, but somebody had said something like, "You're not really black, you're not a real black person," or something like that to my sister, and she was like, "I don't even know what that means, whoop de whoop," and I slowed her down because I've thought about this quite a bit, and I'm like, no, I think we know what they meant when they commented, "You're not really black." I mean, whether it's true or not is an interesting question.
Yeah.
But I think we know what they meant. They meant you're not from the hood. That's what they meant, right? When they say not really black, again in America, when somebody says that means
you didn't grow up. You didn't grow up around black culture.
You're not from the hood.
Yeah.
Well, not just black culture. You didn't grow up around poor black culture, right? You know what I mean? And there's segments, right? There's economic, there's cultural, there's black folks. They grow up in the hood, but they're sheltered, and it's in the church, or they're sheltered in the arts. Right? I mean, there's all of these.
And there's multiple cultures and subcultures even within just a culture there.
I think the thing that was trippy to me that I've just started taking ownership of that's interesting is like I've always worked on being proud of being mixed and being proud of being Jewish and being proud of being black, but never proud of being white.
Interesting.
And I'm part white, not just Jewish white. My mom's Ashkenazi Jew, but also my dad's side. My dad's African American. And African Americans are almost always mixed. I mean, genetically, you know what I'm saying? And so, like, this year I've been like, oh, yeah, but I'm also white, man. I also got Irish in me. And, like, yeah, man, the Irish roots. You know what I mean? Black Irish. And I got Russian. And, you know what I mean? I got some Scandinavian in me. And I like the West. And I like the history of Europe. And so this year I'm working on being proud and white. You know what I'm saying?
Hey, but do you still drop? It's funny because every time with my brother, we'll, like, be talking about shit. We'll be like, fucking white people.
Yeah, all the time.
You know what I'm talking about. You know what I'm talking about.
And that is what I'm, honestly, is what I'm most concerned about in the new administration is that I can't talk shit about white people with impunity. I used to be able to be in the middle of a clinical meeting and be like, man, fucking white folks, you know what I mean? And I could do it. And I'm really afraid that I'm going to be censored. I'm going to be canceled, bro.
No, I think you're fine.
I'm going to do it anyway.
No, I think you're fine. This is actually an interesting thing. I was watching a clip, you know, Ari Shaffir?
Yeah.
And he was talking about like it was more centered around like the woke stuff about like, you know, structural systematic racism, blah, 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 blah.
I want to ask you about that, by the way.
Yeah. And he's like, doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And you know what? I've thought about this a lot, even prior to seeing that. I've went and sought out like highly woke progressive groups and gone to them.
Sure.
When I sit in them, I agree with 90% of some of the shit that they say. Yeah. I agree with more than I disagree with.
Yeah.
There's some stuff, like I remember one I was in, they were like, prisons, we just need to completely abolish them. They shouldn't exist. And I'm like, nah, bro, I know people who need to be in prison. Like I grew up with some of these guys. A cage is, you don't want them in society, you know? They might be good friends of mine, but they see you and you are...
You can put flowers in there and stuff, but you don't want about running around.
Yes, 100%.
I would agree.
But for the most part, I think this is the biggest problem. Because it creates a narrative. It's funny. My chick hit me up 2 mornings ago, and because the new administration, they're like, North Carolina enacted a law where if you try to abort your kid, you can it's punishable by death or some shit like that. And I'm like, okay, I don't know what to do. Like, don't send me this shit. Number one, because I'm powerless over people, places, and things. My good old 12-step.
I don't want to think about it.
Well, at the end of the day, what am I going to do? I don't live in North Carolina. I live in probably the most progressive state in the union.
The last one.
By far.
West Coast.
So in my mind, it's and then it's like and again we worked it out. Me and her are actually really good. But it was like this thing was like, oh, you don't care about women. It turns into this thing like now I don't care about women's rights. I'm like, whoa, that was a stretch. That's actually not what I'm saying.
Not at all.
I just can't do nothing about that. Love women. Dude, you want to go get abortions? I don't give a shit. I think you should have the freedom to choose. It's just where it becomes into this shit breeds a weird confirmation bias hive mentality that paints a perception that, everyone's like, when you go outside, there's racist people, anti-Semitic people are everywhere, anti-black, anti-white even, you know?
I think what's interesting to me about that is when I think about...
We good, Woody?
Oh, yeah, no, I'm just...
Okay, just want to make sure. I had 20 minutes.
Right on. When I think about the claims of, I don't like using the word woke, but when I think about the claims of, the history of the United States, history of oppression, marginalized communities, gender, sexual orientation, race, something about the identity pieces of this, which has been the real hotbed, right? I agree with you. Like I studied, Foucault. I studied Jacques Derrida. Like I've thought deeply about, how power works and kind of how it operates, and so the foundation of that for me is actually quite solid. The issue for me has largely been around, okay, well, what do we do with that information? And so attempting to use the government and corporations as a means to enact change is where I go, because those are cultural issues. Mm-hmm. And cultural issues need to be sorted out in the culture. Mm-hmm. And when you try to coerce culture through the various institutions in which you're critiquing, you're thinking about it wrong. You're creating 100%. Messy stuff, dude. Yeah, don't do that. 100%. You know what I mean? That's why I'm like, I don't want that in the Recover Integrity workplace. You know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
I actually want you to be able to be a human who makes a mistake or makes a joke, and then we can figure out how to have rupture and repair. And the more energy and conversation, like, let's be super honest that race relations, I'm not talking about what's underneath, but how people were with each other racially was better in 2005 and in 2010 and in 2015 than it is now.
It is.
So
it's crazy.
What was going, you know what I mean? So for me, culture needs to sort culture out, and cultural changes take time. So for me, like, gay marriage as a law, like, there's a law that needs to change. Like, let's get the law changed. Like, that's the judiciary, that's the government. Like, that's really important. But a lot of these issues are not issues that the law has any real power over. Abortion is a complicated issue. You know what I mean? I'm pro-choice, but I always say I'm glad that I'm a man. It makes it easy for me to go on pro-choice.
Yeah, 100%.
Because because spiritually, if I'm a religious person, or even just spiritually, the idea of when life becomes something sacred is a subjective unknown.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
Exist.
And so to say I know is
you don't know.
It's a very difficult issue. Let's put it that way. You know what I mean? Very difficult issue.
Ad nauseum philosophical debate on when life has begun.
Completely. I mean, you might find out that the imprint of the soul comes from, plasma and some other dimension that's heavenly at the moment of conception. And then you're going to feel really bad. I mean, maybe you might still make the same choice. You might still say, well, I still believe in abortion because shit happens on Earth. Right? I mean, it isn't right. I mean, you could.
Yeah, 100%.
But you were wrong about your reasoning, and you might change your mind. So, you know what I mean?
Yeah, 100%.
Or we want to cover, man.
Dude, that was like the dopest thing. Either way, how this just like literally, we didn't even like, the funniest part about this, we just talk.
Yeah, that's great.
It's just the best thing ever.
This is great, man.
Because it doesn't feel like, we're going to shoot content or a podcast. You know what I mean?
I had a thought, but this is deep. I don't know if you want to go deep last 15 minutes.
No, let's go.
And personal.
Let's go. I'm fine.
Okay.
Yeah, no, it's whatever.
Do you think when you talk about doing inner child work and the resistance there, and you talked about your mom's mental health condition, and you talked about a type of mental health condition that is really out of her control. It's not like depression or anxiety, right? It's a real... being out of touch with reality at times. That part of not wanting to go too deep into it is like an unconscious concern that you'll open something up that's supposed to be buried, which was kind of...
I could lend credibility to that. I definitely don't like heightened emotional states because I never want to be in a position like when my mom would go manic and start flipping psychotic, I'd be like it's weird. What I've had to learn through like this thing though too, piggyback off what we're talking about, is in an intimate relationship when my partner has like heightened emotional experiences, I'm almost like autistic.
Yeah, you good.
Yeah, suck it up.
No problem.
Yeah, suck it up.
Yeah.
But now I'm like I feel like, they have like therapy for sociopaths where they teach them how to act in like a socially responsible manner, even though emotionally and empathetically they don't know.
Cognitive empathy.
Yes.
Yeah.
Like I almost feel like I'm learning the performative elements of, but it's only in intimate partnerships.
Yeah.
So there is something there because if he breaks down, you break down, I'll show up like that and be like, there's a connection there for whatever the closeness of that relationship. is where it starts to, I have a sticking point.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
But I also have no investment in the other relationships in the way I do with someone who I'm choosing to potentially have kids with or stuff like that. Yeah. So it's easier for me to show up because I had friends, and friends are an extension of family for me in a lot of respects.
Got it.
So does that make sense?
Yeah, I misunderstood. I thought when you were saying you were autistic, that you were saying I keep totally cool, but you were saying you don't know what to do when she's having a hard time.
Yes.
Got
like,
it. Okay, got it.
I do, but I don't. Like if you heard my internal voice, it'd be like, do I tell her like, hey, this is spilled milk?
Trying to figure out what she might need emotionally.
Yes. And I'm like, no, but I could do that for someone else.
I think that's very difficult in emotional relationships in general, and I can imagine that with, no, I do. I think it is interesting how I get into my head of like literally I'm trying to figure out the steps or something in my marriage.
With Emily still?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And you guys have been together how long?
20 years, bro. Yeah. Yeah, I was thinking about it. Like recently she's been spun out by the fires and the pollution and my kid, and she came in and she knows me well. She's like gotten pretty good at like not knowing how I might respond to something. So she's like, I'd like to say something. I don't want you to do this. I don't want you to do that. I don't want you to do this. I hope this doesn't, you know what I mean? It's like, she's got a whole script to like.
Yeah, she's already preemptively got it all.
None of it worked, by the way. I mean, and I immediately, so it's interesting in my mind when that happens. It's like, the cognitive turns on, like, of how do I support her? Like, what are the steps I need to take to support her to hold space? And so it is rigid. It becomes stiff. Kind of, not all the time.
I know what you're saying, but in more heightened situations.
Yeah, that's interesting. It's interesting. I'd like to think about that a while. I haven't thought about that and why that might be.
Well, it makes me feel a little bit better. 20 years in, I'm only like a year in. You
know what's interesting though? Like for me, on the other end, I talk about this. With my stuff, my attachment issues, when we'd be having a difficult time and she'd go cold and like cut off, you know what I mean? I would get enraged. You know what I mean? Like I would be, because shame would come up for me. I didn't have the word at the time.
Yeah,
it was
of course.
Happening, but shame would come up for me, and it was hard to hold, and so then that would just kind of transform into rage.
Feel like a shit human because she's got you.
Whatever. I'm not worthy. You know what I mean? And I have a not worthiness, debt, guilt, shame from my own, childhood
process.
So it's like that would come up, and that for years, bro. And I never like
connected it.
I never knew what to do. And then finally I was like, I asked myself the question, man, like, and this is deep, but like, what is it that I think I need? Right. So not just with her might I like get rigid in the thinking of steps, also with me.
Yeah.
Right. I'm like,
your own internalized
what do
processes.
I need in the relationship? And I had to like break it into steps, and I was like, okay, well, I don't like that she physically is on the other side of the bed and gives me her back. I'm like, in fact, I think I want like reassurance. Hey, like I might be upset with you, but we're good. Like I still love you. You know what I mean? With physically. So like it dawned on me like, that's actually kind of what I need. So I went to her. I was like, hey, you want to take a walk? It was real. We're taking a walk. We're walking up to this park, and I'm like, hey, can I ask you a favor? He's like, yeah. I'm like, when we're having a hard time, and I know maybe sometimes for you, the natural response is to kind of, for whatever reasons, to kind of cut off and give me your back and kind of ice me out. Do you think in those moments maybe you could just kind of put a hand on my hand so that I know we're still cool? And she's like, yeah, I could do that. I was like, thanks. And I'm like, and if you're ever having a hard time, is there anything you need?
Yeah, to reciprocate.
And it's 5 years later, I'm still waiting to hear, but. You know what I mean? But that for me, it was like, wow, man.
Yeah.
Like just figuring out something, so basic.
Yeah.
Like, or not even what I necessarily need, but what I would like. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? I was doing without it, but what did I actually want?
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
100%.
And it's amazing how challenging, just love.
Yeah.
Is,
the internalized process of it too.
Yeah, it's deep, man. It's good, man. It's good. What's good? Don't even get me started on psychoanalysis, guilt, and shame, bro. I don't even want to open it up.
We're probably going to have to do this again anyways. You're going to need more content, right?
Yeah, man. I don't know what I need or what I don't.
Yeah, I think we do it again.
But I'd love to really think about something. You said for a moment, like, what is something, we pretty much agree. We tend to, even when we disagree, but I haven't even think we bumped into anything.
I don't think we've ever disagreed on anything.
Yeah.
You know what I want to talk about next time, though?
Yeah.
Is your impeccable Socratic questioning abilities.
Oh, really?
Yeah, I think actually I've seen a lot of people try to do it, but I think you have a delivery style that, like, I think about quite frequently.
Yeah. I am quite curious.
But no, but there was one day where you did it, and like, I'm decent. Mm-hmm. You're with, just edit this guy's name out. I'm just gonna say his first name, the kid Nick. When we had the family in the room, that guy, and he was the worst.
Yeah.
He was the worst.
Yeah, I love him, but
he was. Same.
I got to tell you a story about him though. Go ahead. Same
thing. Love him. But there was how you got him down the breadcrumbs. Like, I love that shit. To me, where it's like, you know what I think about? Like, if we had that as like a TikTok video, the Dave Chappelle, gotcha, bitch.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Yeah. It was fucking beautiful.
Oh, thanks, man.
To be frank.
Yeah.
And I think I said something to you, like, maybe in passing, but I think about that for a long time because you're like, so you believe this? Okay, cool. All right, cool. And you believe, but it was your speed, bro. It was the speed, which I think is important with that, because if you're not fast enough in your Socratic questioning, they realize how you're leading them down the breadcrumbs, and then they back off of it. It was gangster.
Yeah. I'm a hound dog.
It was gangster.
Yeah, I mean.
It was. There's something that's to me. Yeah. That's something that can't be trained.
That's
it's experience.
I call it tracking. It's pattern recognition and tracking. Like, you're tracking something. You know what I mean? Like, I always joke about.
It is.
I joke about my boy. I said, I'm a hound dog. I like to track things down. But the funny thing is, and I appreciate this about you, and I'm not doing it like, each other, but I'm gonna start an adult group for people in recovery. That is like a little more no holds barred, because I felt so conflicted in letting myself go in tracking when I know get rid of that. No, not that.
Cut.
Like all that stuff which I love it. Like when I'm in that zone, I love to do it, but I don't like to hurt people. You know what I mean? And I also know people are sensitive and it can create a rupture, and I don't know how much they're hurt. And you know what I mean? Like, I'm a sensitive guy. And so I'm actually going to start an adult evening track, basically for narcissistic men, you know what I mean, who are in their recovery. This is not like, right, who are like, no, I want that. Like, I want to get honest with myself. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then see what happens.
I'll come.
That's
I just
want,
because I enjoy those group dynamics. Though.
Yeah,
it's interesting.
We can co-facilitate.
I know. I'm down. I think it would be good.
Yeah, that's what I want to do.
Have you met Michaelis yet?
Oh, yeah, I know Michaelis. Yeah.
Michaelis is fun to run groups with, bro.
I haven't run groups with him, man. But I've danced when he was DJing, bro.
He is fun. I
like he's a music guy. He's coming up a lot. I gotta give him a call. Yeah, he looked like.
I think the thing, though, one last thing before we do end is there's the thing you said, you don't want to hurt people. I think the philosophy I operate under is I will not be effective in helping you if I'm too caught up in your emotional state.
That's great. You know what? And when you say that, the truth is, I don't want to hurt people. That's
I agree. We're on the same page.
But here's the thing. I'm working on my guilt. And so for me, the level of guilt I might experience after a rupture with somebody is a lot. Keep me up at night.
Yeah. You're carrying it.
I carry a lot.
The back.
But I've been working, like, that's why I've been like really studying guilt and shame, because I've been really working on narcissistic persecutory guilt. Now, the line between what kind of guilt is good guilt, because I care and I hurt you and I want to reparative guilt, and the line between narcissistic guilt where, like, yeah, okay, man, like, I poked you, but like it was for your good and you're gonna be okay.
Yeah.
And sleeping at night, for me, I'm figuring that out. You know
which one's the balance?
Yeah.
Well, and there's so much nuance to the dynamics you and I are talking about, specifically working with other people, that it's like, yeah.
Can I tell you about a moment with Nick though? Oh shit, edit that out.
He can edit. He'll edit it.
Right.
He'll edit. He knows.
I don't know if I told you about this. It was profound, bro. So he did something before or after at the house, ordered something, and I bone it. He was the only guy that had me go into the house. I was just like in a zone that month. So I go to the house, And there was something about him that brought it out of me. Not even, I liked him. I had positive transference, you know what I mean? But there was, you know how sometimes like there's just certain people bring certain things out of you.
100%.
He just brought out the part of me that liked to play to get to the truth. You know what I mean? Aggressively though.
Yeah, I know what you're saying.
I don't know what, maybe it was his dad's energy. His
You're
dad
right.
was an aggressive guy. And it was like, I just found myself in my version of that role. I mean, I don't know. But there was
I know exactly what you're talking about though.
So I go in and I'm just till I get him to kind of confess.
It was over the kratom and shit. I think we talked about this.
And but I don't know if I tell you what happened, bro. So then he's like, he had collapsed, you know what I mean? But he was kind of shut down. And then I brought him into the community, and he was kind of shut down. And I was like, yo, you need to clean your mess, clean your mess up, you know? And he's telling everybody, but he's dissociated. He's not really in it, and he's not giving eye contact. We had a big old brother that was there at the time from New York, who I really like. I hope he's still sober. And everybody was around. And at the end, like he said, I said, you know what, man, you need to stand up, bro. And he stood up. I said, everybody come here. And we all surrounded him. You know what I mean? I said, man, everybody put a hand on this guy, man. And everybody put a hand on him. You know what I mean? And he started to like kind of release a little bit of the shame and guilt. And he like this, bro, standing, all of us there with hands on him. I said, do me. And Pierre was, the brother was in front of him. And Pierre had his hand on his chest. The dude was huge. You know, dude was 6'3", his hands were this big. And I said, man, do me a favor. I said, look up in this man's eyes. Like, lift your chin up. You know what I mean? And he went, and he broke. Boom! We got to it, bro. It was like the drill. And then the grief, bro.
Yeah, those moments. Yeah.
Oh, it was so beautiful. I was so upset that he relapsed after, dude. I'm like, you know that moment? I'm like, that was you, bro. That was you. Mm-hmm. Like this guy who's worried about whatever you think daddy wants you to be like. It was beautiful, man.
Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about. I've seen it happen a few times. Those are rare moments like that, though.
Yeah, man. Oh yeah, for sure. You can't
recreate that.
You can't coerce them.
Yeah, it either happens or it doesn't.
If you do, you're an asshole, man. You're a jerk.
Well, you're at that point, it's not therapeutic. It's traumatic.
Yeah. And it's ego.
Yeah.
It's ego. You know what I mean? It's always tricky. My man, it's good to see you, bro.
You're the best.